have two speakers. We have Mr. Semetin Balogun, who is going first, and he is going to be speaking on the topic PHP at scale. So we encourage you all to pay attention so as to ask questions, and I'm sure you'll get the answers you're looking for. So Mr. Semetin Balogun is a PHP developer here at Bincom, and he will be speaking on the topic PHP at scale. So we invite to Mr. Semetin Balogun.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here today as we talk about PHP, the server-side, the popular server-side programming language. So I'll be sharing my slide as we discuss the topic before us today. I believe you can all hear me right.
Yes, we can.
We can hear you, sir.
All right, so PHP as K. So let's suppose as a business owner, you have, can we all see my screen, by the way?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Let's say as a business owner, you have a new startup, and then you've decided to build this using a PHP framework, or maybe even pure PHP, maybe Laravel as a framework, or Symfony, or Ye or U2. And then with time, what you see is that your business is expanding. So you have increased amount of data to work with on the application. You have multiple requests, your application is solving and it's actually querying multiple requests at the same time. You have growing number of users on the same app. And then what happens is that the application probably start developing a problem. So there is slower request time. Maybe sometimes the application even crashes. So you want to ask yourself, what do I do at this point? So it's actually very simple. What you need to do is to scale the application. And what do we mean by scaling? So scalability, when you say an app is scalable, what you mean is that it can adapt, it can withstand, and then it can support an increasing amount of data or a growing number of users and even requests per time. So let's say when you build the application, you only have a few hundred users, and then with time, more people adopt it, you have 1,000, then maybe 10,000, then maybe 100,000 or even 1,000,000. So scalability simply means that that particular application you have that has been built down can actually grow as your users or as the request that is solving, as the request that is being, done on the application is increasing per time. So that is exactly what scalability is all about. So we want to ask ourselves, are application built with PHP scalable? Can PHP scale? And this is a question that is actually not new. And there are a lot of answers regarding that. People have a different sentiment regarding this. Some people think PHP is not scalable. But is that really so? So for us to actually know whether PHP is scalable, it's just a very simple question. We're just going to ask if there are applications that have been built using PHP, and if they've scaled over time. I think that will basically answer the questions, right? And what do we have? So is it scalable? Maybe, or maybe not. So let's see. Facebook, which is like the biggest social media platform out there, is powered by PHP. It's built in PHP. And it started, of course, with just a few users. And then now we have millions of users worldwide that use the application. And then it's still, still allowing for growing number of users, multiple requests at every single point in time. And it's still working just fine. What about Wikipedia? It's a popular site that we all go to search for information and we use. It's powered by PHP. Even WordPress, the content management system, which is by far the most popular one, is also built with PHP. Also Slack. So the backend of Slack is actually powered with PHP. And then it has increasing growing number of users. It's quick. Sometimes when you post a link in Slack, it instantaneously gives you a preview of the particular link. So that's something. And we have the growing number of users using the application for time. A lot of organizations use this. Even here at Bincom Dev Center, we use Slack, and this application, the backend is powered by PHP. Also, Etsy, an e-commerce site where a whole lot of users, buyers and sellers alike, they meet and then they distribute and sell their product. It's also built with PHP. And then Baidu, the most popular search engine in the Southeast Asia. All right. So this is something that is used there, and you know what the search engine does, right? So some multiple requests per time, and this also is built with PHP. So I guess the question is answered, right? PHP applications can actually scale, but what actually allows for scaling in all of these applications? Is it the code itself, like the programming language, or the way the code is structured, or the architecture, the design, or the infrastructure in which the code is running? Well, scaling is more about the app architecture in itself, rather than the code in itself, although it's not just all about the architecture. So there are some things involved here. So first is good coding practices. I'm going to talk more about this. Then we talk about some of the infrastructures that you use, talk about the servers, talk about sessions, database, and maybe cloud computing. These are part of the architectural design that are actually going to help your PHP program or application scale, because PHP as a programming language has a natural advantage to scale so far the condition in which it is written can allow for that. So like I said, it has a natural advantage for scaling. So with good coding practices, an app built with PHP can be optimized for scalability. And that's the advantage. Most of these software that I've mentioned, Facebook, Wikipedia, Baidu, Slack, can actually scale over time. So let's talk about some of the good coding practices. So if you actually want to build an application with PHP and you want it to scale, because of course, except if you do not intend, if your plan is not to allow multiple users to use application, or you do not foresee your application to grow with time. However, if you think your application is meant to grow with time and then more users are going to adopt it, and then it's going to be like querying multiple, going to have multiple queries that is running every single time, then you want to take in some of these good coding practices. This is not all, but this is just a few of them. One is that you do not use uninitialized variables. So suppose you want to write a loop, let's say while loop, a do while loop, a for loop. You want to ensure that when you want to increment, you initialize first. Incrementing without initializing will actually be slower, 9 to 10 times slower than usual. So if you increment that, it's going to be faster. So that's one thing. Then you do not want to use functions within loops. So let's say maybe for loops especially. So you don't use functions, just write it clean and clear there. Then a method that can be static should be declared as static, because static func methods have been seen to be faster than the ones that are not. So if you know that a method can just be static, then you should declare it as static. Then if you can, you should use a lot of MySQL query, which it's the server, is the database PHP basically run on. So it's actually very faster when you write most of the queries. Just take the advantage of the SQL and write most of the queries, and that it is actually faster. So these are some of the good practices that we basically optimize your application that is being built with PHP for scalability. So let's talk about some other things. Caching. This is another natural advantage that PHP have, especially OP catch. So OP catch is actually an inbuilt is an inbuilt catch method for PHP, and it's actually going to help you because more like when you send a request, and then it's going to store it so that the next time you make that request, it's not going to go back to the database to fetch the data. It's just going to supply it immediately because it has been stored, given the first time that you queried it. And then you also have app catch that so these are other catching methods that you can use to basically, so catching, we reduce the workload on the database and then temporarily store frequently queried data, such that when you query them the next time, the requests don't have to travel far into the database before actually giving you the result of the query. Then Doctrine Catch 2 is a library that allows you to also catch some of those queries too. So now let's move further. Let's leave the programming language. We've established that with some good coding practices, and then when you take advantage of the catching method, you can actually optimize for scaling. So let's talk about some infrastructure, servers. And servers actually play an important role with scalability. So how do we use server to scale essentially? So we can do scale up. And in this case, you have a single server, a very big server with a lot of memories, with a lot of processor, and with great storage. So this way, you expect that it's going to allow for a lot of users to send in their data, query their data, or even store information or send information into the application essentially. So that is scale up, it's vertical scaling. So you have a single unit, but that single unit has a lot of processor, has a lot of memory, and then a great storage to allow for that. Then we have, and this is one major challenge with this, is that it can actually be very, very expensive to use, right? And at times it might not be exactly efficient because it's not, sometimes the amount of time people use the application might not be at the same time. Maybe they use it more at day or more at night, okay? So eventually the scale up might not really prove efficient, but it's a very fast way to actually scale up the application essentially. Then scale out. And this is essentially adding more servers to the ones you have. So once you add more servers to it, what you see is that you're going, and then you can also add the load balancer. So this will help to distribute the workload across all the servers and then essentially reduce the workload on one. So that way you have faster request time. So once you send an information, you expect that it's going to, once you query something or you send in data, it's going to be done quickly. Okay, so an interesting thing about this scale out is because all of the servers actually still have access to the same database. So there is no, it's still essentially the same application. It's just that we have multiple but interconnected servers that are working on that particular application. So it makes the work. You can essentially have more users, more query per time, just because you have a lot of servers to do that work for you. So another way to scale is by adding more database, because one of the things that I can actually demand that you scale up an application is when this, the amount of data on the application is increasing. And this actually comes with more users too. So suppose you have more users upload more of their data, more of their information on the database. Of course, you expect that the storage levels start increasing. So what you want to do if you have a lot of data to store is that you want to increase your database. So you want to supplement your major database with other databases. So in this case, it's just good to give preference to relational database because they're more structured and they can just up. However, you can also use NoSQL in this case too. So, but essentially, one thing with adding more database is that you have more space to take in more data. So your application is not going to slow down because there's enough space to take in the data, to take in the increased number of users that you have in now. And this is a very good way to also scale up an application built with PHP. And this is infrastructure, by the way. So part of the architectural design. So another way to also scale up an application built with PHP is using sessions. However, there's a challenge that comes with this, is that the session must be stateless. Now, what do you mean by that? Usually when you log into, usually the way most PHP works is by session. So when you log in, on that server that you logged on, there is a session there that has been created for that. So the server recognizes you at that point in time that this is the person that has logged in. So that way, if you have multiple people that, let's say, are on an e-commerce site and then they are all buying one or two things and they all have their cards. So the session is going to help the application know who is who. Is going to know that this person is the owner of this product that has been added to the cart, and then it's not going to mix that up with the other users that are using it simultaneously. So that is a stateful session. However, if you want to scale your application using session, you want to ensure that your server, your sessions are stateless, because in this case you have multiple servers. So if it's stateful, that means that only one server is going to recognize who this user is. If the information that is sent by the user is distributed or redistributed to another server, the server is not going to recognize this person, right? And then essentially nothing has been done. So what are the ways we can actually solve this particular problem? Because with sessions, you can actually upscale out your application. One is that you want to store session in the database. So once you store the session in the database, remember that all the servers have access to the same database. So they're going to recognize that, okay, this is this user, and then the workload can be distributed along all the servers, and then the work, like, it can be scaled that way too. Also, you can also save it on Redis. So Redis server is also another good server that can actually help with session in scaling up an application. Also, you can decouple your application into a distinct front end and back end, and then employ stateless APIs for the back end. And that way too, we can essentially scale up our application using PHP session. And one final thing is cloud computing. And this is very interesting because with cloud, you can actually, let's say with Google Platform or AWS Web Service now, you can actually have a large storage for your growing application, right? And then let's say with the Google Cloud Database, you can use that as database servers, the storage bucket as static files now, files that are there permanently. So you can just put them there and just create space essentially for your application. And then Google Cloud Firestore as key value session server. Remember I mentioned that with server, we can also scale our application, and then Cloud Run to host our application server. You can also use AWS Web Service to essentially host your application, and this AWS Web Service, Amazon Web Service, can actually allow your application grow. So your application can go within the web service essentially, and can have more users, more requests per time without it slowing down the application. And that's about cloud computing. And this is a very good way to go if you are building an application that you know that with time you're going to have an increased number of users, or you're going to have more requests on that same application. So you don't want it to get to a point that it now breaks down, and then you now want to start rewriting the whole thing again. Just store it in a cloud, and then it can scale. It can scale professionally. So in conclusion, I've established that PHP as a programming language can scale. It has a natural advantage to scale, and with the right architectural design, coupled with good coding practices and efficient infrastructure, you can actually build an application that can scale up in support of more users, data, even requests on the application, just as we see in popular applications like Facebook, Wikipedia, WordPress, Slack, Baidu, and many others that are powered by PHP. And this is true. This is also true for PHP frameworks too. So many frameworks can actually provide a very good, it's a framework basically, so they provide a very good platform to write PHP code and build application written in PHP that can scale with time. So thank you guys for listening. I will be taking the questions now.
Sorry, please, we'll take questions after all presentations.
All right.
So, over to the host.
So thank you very much, Mr. Semetin. That was a nice presentation. So we don't know if anyone have questions before I go ahead with some questions I've received from some people already. So any questions so far about that you would like to ask Mr. Semetin?
Mr. Matthew, after the second presentation, we'll do questions together.
All right, no problem. So we would like to invite our second speaker, which will also expand on this topic. The person of Mr. Let me confirm. Okay, I think. Don't have him on this call. So let's take question first. I don't think we have him yet on this call. So do we have any questions, please, before we proceed? Because he will be joining us soon. Okay, Mr. Semetin. So the first question is talking about the scaling. What if a user, maybe the person doesn't feel like it's yet time to scale? Perhaps maybe he's just starting web development. Like, does that person as well benefit from this your presentation?
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So if you think that your application won't scale or not, well, you shouldn't really bother yourself about it. But it's just a good practice to ensure that your code is optimized for that. I mean, it's not an amnesty if you build an application that can potentially scale if it has the right environment or the right infrastructure to do that, while it has not scaled yet. So because you can't be sure. So if you build an application and you don't have in mind that it might scale, what if it scales? So that's just the question you want to ask yourself. So whether or not to build an application to potentially scale, it has no real impact if it doesn't scale or not. And might just be an advantage if it now scaled up. So it's just good to just employ those good practices.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you, still on this scalability. The next question is, what about AWS? Like, that's another way to achieve scalability. If I'm wrong, like, what are the disadvantages of using it when compared to other methods?
Okay, so well, AWS is Amazon Web Service, and of course, it's also a cloud system too. And cloud systems are efficient ways of scaling your applications. Why? Because of the storage system. Most times they can even have, let's say, unlimited amount of storage, except that it might be very expensive, which is the major challenge, right? And their servers also are very efficient, so it's a good way to scale. So the advantages are a lot because it can ensure your security. You probably have a lot of storage to work with. The servers are there to also help and ensure that your application is very fast and maybe there's no downtime also. However, the challenge you might just have is that it might be expensive to maintain and to actually achieve what to your taste essentially. So that's one thing. Maybe if you're just getting to use AWS, might take a while for you to maybe get the in and out of it, but it's not exactly that tricky to use essentially. So
All right, thank you. I still have another question for you.
okay.
You made mention of kitchen that you catch.
Yeah.
Like how does it work? How does kitchen work when I want to code, and how does it contribute to scaling my website I'm building?
All right. So caching is essentially a way of supplementing the database. So just imagine you want to query something. You maybe want to add to the database or you want to request something from the database, essentially. You want to query. And what you want to query, you still want to do it later and later and later and later. All right. So there's a lot of work and a lot of pressure on the database once you keep going back and forth to do that. So what caching actually do is that frequently queried data are stored temporarily in a cache. Okay. Maybe, and there are different ways to cache. You can have read through, aside, and many other ways. So essentially, frequently queried data are stored temporarily in a cache. That way, once you request once you query the data again, it doesn't go to the database. You just have the request returned back to you as quickly as possible, because that's one advantage of pitching to it. It increases the query time, so you get your request as soon as possible. Why? Because you're not going to the database to fetch the data. The data has been fetched already and has been stored locally and temporarily, so you can always get that hands in hand. So it's an essential way to scale up, because multiple requests can actually be stored in a cache, right? And then users can get them handy so quickly, and it doesn't like slow down the application, and the workload on the database also is reduced, and there's no bottlenecks that slow down the database from returning data or for storing data, essentially. So that's how kitchen helps. I think
you're muted. Matthew, you were muted, or you still unmuted?
Okay. Oh, sorry. I love your answer. We benefit from that. I don't know if there's any more question for him before the next speaker comes up. Any other question concerning scaling your PHP code, scaling your website? Okay, I still have one question for you.
Okay.
Please, can That horizontal scaling you made mention of, how does it differ from the vertical scaling? And
All right.
what happens? How is it much more beneficial, or which is the best?
Okay, so which is the best? Okay, let me start with the difference. So when you talk about vertical scaling and horizontal scaling, in vertical scaling, you have a single unit, okay? And that single unit, you can add more processors, that is more CPUs, you can add more storage to it, but everything is in a single unit, okay? In horizontal, however, instead of adding up to a single unit, you actually add accessory units to the existing servers. So like you have maybe 10 or 20 instead of just one single one. But the 10 or 20 are all interconnected and they are all working on the same project. Okay. And the interesting thing about them is that vertical scaling can actually be very expensive to get one single massive unit. And it might overserve the purpose also. So let's say your application is only 12 midnight that people use it the most, and you have a vertical scaling. So that means that that is just idle the entire time, doing nothing, and then only comes up when the users are on it, maybe 12 midnight or any hour of the day, which in the case of vertical, in the case of horizontal scaling, now it's just like you're adding, and if it's not serving the purpose, you can just easily like detach. So that's it. So vertical can be very expensive and might not be exactly efficient, but it's very fast, very fast. But you can also achieve the how it can be fast with horizontal as well, because the more servers you add to it, the faster the application will become, and it will increase the time of request basically without slowing it down. So that's the essential difference, and that can be cost effective, by the way, but it might not really serve you as much as the vertical scaling, but we just do the work just well. And as you have increasing users, you can just add more servers. This essentially. But I might add that if you want to now put in like factor sessions into it, like I said before, you want to ensure that the sessions are stateless and not state, so that all the servers will recognize a user once it's logged in and not the particular server that the person is logged on. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Semetsen. The floor is still open for questions, but if you'd like to drop them in the chat, that's also welcomed. We are going to take them. And the second speaker hasn't joined us yet. While we wait for him, I have a brief presentation to make. So please confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, and thank you everybody for joining once again. So Bincom Dev Center is the host of today's event. And Bincom Dev Center is a multi-location technology, talent development, and solutions platform. We have locations virtually near you. We have locations physically at Lagos, Oyo State, Kaduna, Kano, Ogun State, Delta State, and we plan to expand to many more locations. And some of the services that we offer at Bincom is the Bincom Academy, the Bincom Tech Internship, the Bincom Tech Apprenticeship, the Bincom Community Events and Projects, the Light Space, the Bincom Global Tech Program, the Immigrate Program, the Bincom Mentoring Program, and the Labs by Bincom. So drilling down into some of these services, the first one is the Bincom Academy, which is facilitated by Bincom Dev Center, and it lasts for 4 weeks. And this takes a Montessori approach. And the classes available include the Python, the mobile app, the PHP, the foundation class, the graphics class, project management, and many more. And if you're interested in any of these classes, you have to visit the link bincom.net/academy to apply. And the next service that we offer at Bincom is the Light Space, where we provide helpful workspace to encourage collaboration and drive innovation. And the services of the Light Space include event spaces, meeting rooms, guest rooms, co-working spaces, and we have locations virtually near you. We have locations at Lagos, Oyo, Kano, Kaduna, Ogun State, Delta State, and you can find a complete list of our locations at blog.bincom.net/campuses. Then the next service we offer is the Bincom community events and projects, which is geared at giving back to the community and building the tech ecosystem. So the events are divided into 5. We have master classes, we have meetups like the PHP meetup, which is happening now. We have idea sharing events, we have explore on the move, challenge and brainstorm. So some of our other initiatives include the Bincom Tech Network and the Bincom Tech Club. Then the next program, sorry, please give me a minute. Okay, yeah. The next program is the Bincom Global Tech Program. And this gives you the opportunity to learn tech skills, gain experience, and gain exposure. And with the income sharing agreement associated with this program, you have the ability to learn now and pay later.
What are the things you need for this program? All you need is your laptop device, a hunger and a passion for IT. Those are the core tools that you need. The total cost of the Bincom Global Tech Program for the period of 1 to 2 years is just 1.2 million naira. But you don't need to worry about that because it gets better. We have various financing options to help you cover the cost of the program. So you don't need to have any money to even apply or be admitted to the program. One of the financing options that are available for this program is the income sharing agreement. What that simply means is that the company will sponsor your learning. So you would learn for the period of 1 to 2 years and you only start paying back when you get a job and you start earning your income after this program. This means that aside from skills, experience and exposure, the company is also willing to invest its own money on you. That's a total package. What are you waiting for? You need to go on our website, bincom.net/globaltech. You need to register and then launch your global tech career. I'm sure that the tech world, the tech industry is waiting for a great talent like you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's that for the Bincom.
What are the things you need for this program? All you need is your laptop.
That's that for the Bincom Global Tech Program. If you're interested, indicate your interest at bincom.net/globaltech. And the next service we offer at Bincom is called the Emigrates Program, which provides tech-enabled visa opportunities for people in tech, either the technical side of tech or the business side of tech. And you are informed about the opportunity to live and work in places like UK, USA, Canada, or France. And for more information about this, you have to visit bincom.net/emigrates. Then the next one is the Labs by Bincom program, which runs for 3 to 6 months, and it's kind of suitable for core members or people seeking to do IT, where you are brought together with a team, a cross-functional team, and you guys build a startup from scratch. So if you're interested in joining the Labs by Bincom, or you need more information about the Labs by Bincom, you can visit the website bincom.net/labs. And you have the opportunity to be an ambassador of Bincom Dev Center when you refer someone to any of our services. Like, for example, if you refer someone to the Global Tech Program, you have the opportunity to earn 10% of the payments made by the person you referred. So that's that about the ambassador campaign. So if you need more information about any of this, you can contact us via mail, by the phone number, or you visit our website. So thank you very much for listening. I don't know if our speaker is available now. Mr. Martin. Hello, Mr. Martin. Okay, thank you everybody for joining, and apologies for the speaker won't be able to join us today, so maybe some other time. Thank you, Mr. Semetin, for joining to us and sharing to us more about PHP at scale. And thank you everybody else for joining. If you're interested in any of the service I talked about, you can reach out to us at bincomdevcenter@bincom.net, or you call the number. So thank you everybody for joining, and have a wonderful rest of the day.